So here's a kind of a question that kind of leads into it. So are you for more government or less government?
I don't know. I'm just kind of fine as how it is.
Okay. So if in the ideal world, would you want more laws or less laws to prosecute people or to not prosecute people?
More laws or less laws?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to answer that question because like I don't know every laws that are out there, and like there's a gajillion, like there's a lot of laws, right?
I definitely don't
See,
know.
and that's kind of my point, because there's a gajillion laws out there. We can't keep up with all of them, and if we just add more to them, there's less that we can do, right?
Yeah, but I mean that doesn't mean like
Hey guys, Dion Thompson here with Saleem and Dion. So we're out here at the beautiful UW campus today, and it's bright as hell. I can hardly see. I'm having to squint my eyes so much. But we're here at the University of Washington. They're going to ask people to define hate speech. So we're in a very liberal college, so I'm expecting them to say, well, whatever offends me, right? So anyways, if you want us to keep doing this, you know, we want to make this our full-time jobs. You know, make sure you support us on Patreon. Make sure you support us on Patreon, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Subscribestar. We want to make this our full-time jobs. Links in the descriptions below. Anyways, stay classy, and hopefully this will be a good shoot. Cheers. Our question for today is, what do you define as hate speech?
hate speech. Oh geez. Well. Oh man. It's kind of like
a loaded question.
Yeah, no. I think it's kind of like inflammatory speech that's done like pretty much just to discriminate against people, and I think it's like, I mean, you could say like me saying like, hey, you're a jerk is like hating on you, but like I think it's like a lot more serious and like targeted against like discriminated groups, and kind of just I don't know, stuff that makes people like feel like really unsafe.
Sure. Give me an example.
An example? Okay. Oh geez. I mean, as one that I can like actually like feel comfortable saying, sort of. I think like maybe like telling people that are just like, if you see someone that just doesn't like look white and you're like yelling at them to like go back to their country or something like that is probably, I think, is kind of hate speech.
So you must be referring to Donald Trump saying with the "go back to your country" tweet, then.
Well, not specifically in reference to that. I mean, that's like an example of it, but I mean, I think just in general, that's kind of a, yeah, just like kind of that behavior as a whole.
Okay. So should we regulate speech, though? I mean, you know, under the Constitution, it literally says, the First Amendment, that the government does not have the right to take away our freedom of speech. That's literally what the First Amendment says. So should we have laws regulating what's like some people call hate speech, because it's a really gray area, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a gray area, and like, I mean, it's true that like constitutionally we have like a right to free speech, but I think also people have like a right to be able to live in their country and like, or just like live in a place and feel comfortable, and like, or not necessarily comfortable as in like we need to like cushion everything, but I think like for some people that have like, that are already naturalized here, that like, you know, that have every right to be here, when some people kind of create an environment such that it's just very, very toxic for them, and it can have like a lot of bad, like it can have like very real issues for those people. So it's just in the same way that like we might have like the free right to like, you know, just kind of do our own actions and like do as we wish, but we also ban certain things because they kind of hurt other people. And I think in that sense it's like important to kind of try to recognize hate speech or like certain types of speech as having a potential to do that. Sure. You know, and other times like also like we have like, it's illegal to like defamation and things, you know, like when we try to ruin someone's reputation by saying blatantly false things, those are also illegal.
It's not actually illegal, it's a civil court violation.
Is it?
It's not actually illegal. They want to arrest people.
Oh sure, okay. But I mean you can sue people for defamation, right?
Sure, in civil court.
Yeah, sure, okay, sure. Yeah, I mean I guess in that way, I mean, I don't know.
So, I mean, let's talk about stand-up comedians, or just comedians in general. I mean, they're literally under attack for simply, I mean, that's literally their life, is making jokes and making money off of said jokes. Like, for example, Doug Stanhope does the most horrific kind of jokes ever. I mean, he's funnier than hell. But, you know, he's always attacked for saying this and saying that. So, you know, should we attack those people as well? Should we regulate them, or should we regulate anybody based upon the fact, well, I don't like it, so I want to regulate you and call you up for hate speech and get you thrown in jail or whatever?
So, I mean, I think that's like, I guess, where like the big gray zone, I think, for me kind of comes from. So it's like, in a case like that, like when it's done in a joking manner, it's like among my friends, like in closed off places, I guess, where it's like nobody can really, I guess, be hurt. I don't know, I guess some people would even argue against that, but you know, you make jokes and you say stuff that you don't mean, and it's like in that way I can see, I feel like it's going too far to like say that like it's illegal or that you can't simply just say something. I think like the intent of it also matters, but it's like, so in that case, I think it's like an argument towards like, I think it's kind of fine, and like when it's done in jest, it's like kind of more understandable, but like I think there's still like very real things, like if you're just like incredibly racist or something, then like even if you're just like doing it ironically or doing it as a joke, like it doesn't negate the effects that it can have.
But the problem is a lot of people say, well, because they're joking or not, they're still called racist. A lot of people still do that. So, and then those are the same people that say, well, we need to regulate free speech, which is not actually free speech if you regulate free speech.
I'm sorry, can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
So just really quick, who objectively decides what racism is? Who objectively decides what is racist? Like somebody said, like there's a viral video going around that air conditioning is sexist. There is a viral video going around that milk is racist. So here's the problem. There was 70 genders thought of in the last couple years, okay? So what if we outlaw hate speech and this keeps pushing and drinking milk becomes racist and is now termed as hate speech? Do you see where I'm going with this? I had to jump that in there.
I mean, I think that's a slippery slope, to be honest. Like, I'm not really gonna even address that point very much, but I think what I can say is like, in terms of like how we deem racist, I don't think there's like any objective, like, organization or any figure that really can deem it that way. And it's more of like an agreement among various people, and like there's going to be people that...
It's not an agreement. There's people that are not in agreement that Trump's tweet was racist.
Yeah.
You know, not even half the country, it's 8% of the progressive left thinks it's very racist, and I'd say, you know, 70% of the country just doesn't give a shit or doesn't think it's racist whatsoever.
Yeah. And not only that, but like there's laws in Canada and somewhere in the UK where literally if you misgender someone, and intentionally, mind you, 3 people have actually gone to jail for that. Like, is that too far? Because if they start to do that in the United States, our free speech is over.
I mean, I don't know, I'd have to think about it more, being put on the spot like that. But I mean, so what you're saying, like when you're saying people aren't in agreement, like, of course people aren't in agreement. People are gonna have disagreements about like what is termed racist or sexist. But like if you're going to end up going to court for that, there's a system in place, and like and everything, like how can we deem...
Well, no, that's what I'm saying is who objectively decides, because if you're letting lawmakers decide, if you're letting courts decide what is free speech and what isn't free speech, because currently the system is only inciting violence is against the law, and that's, you know, very hard to prove, and that's a good system because it allows everyone to express themselves as they please with speech. The problem is if you say, okay, well, the courts can decide what is racist. Well, if you put certain leftist liberal judges on there, they may go on and say that milk is racist and you shouldn't drink milk anymore. Now, that's an exaggeration. I just want to highlight my point, but there's no consensus for what is racist. Now, do you really want to give that power to the courts and the legislators who can't even figure out the national debt crisis? Do you really want them deciding what is free speech and what isn't?
All right, well, I mean, for the last part saying can't even figure out the national debt crisis, like I don't think that's like much of a valid point, because it's like, I mean, do you have a solution for that? Is that really just a can't even do thing?
I mean, at this point,
they're not
not
doing a very
really.
good job of fixing it.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I mean, who
keep
has a
borrowing money.
solution? Okay, well, what's your solution to it then?
Well, I'm not a lawmaker. That's kind of the point. I don't want to be in charge of that kind of thing.
Okay, well, okay, sure, but I mean...
So let's go back to the speech, though, because I mean, I think Saleem made a good point. It's like, well, if they can't figure out the national debt crisis of $25 trillion in, excuse me, total deficit, then how are those same people going to figure out how to regulate free speech?
Well, I mean, those are two different things.
Sure. I mean, but they're under the same lawmakers, though. Like they're appointed by the same people.
I mean, I guess, but I mean,
The point that we're trying to make is that if you give them the power to do that, right? If you put hate speech regulations in that can actually be enforced, then they can actually, jail you over either what the courts say, because, you're giving them the objective authority. We have to have somebody that's objective and non-biased decide what is hate speech, right?
Which is hard to do.
Yeah.
Okay, sure, but I mean, it seems like your argument here is that like hate speech is a undefinable thing. There's nobody that can like really make a good definition
It is
or
an
of it.
undefinable thing.
Okay.
And what is hate speech? Is it something that offends you? Is it something that offends me? I mean, what is hate speech? What is objectively termed as hate speech? You have to be able to define it first.
Okay, sure, but I mean, so suppose that we do have a definition, and then it seems reasonable to most people. Like, just because your argument seems to be like because you can't define it, that you should just like not that making any sort of legislation or kind of like passing any laws about it is a hopeless endeavor because it's not like represented.
Law is very well defined.
Yeah, sure, but I mean.
So here's kind of a question that kind of leads into it. So are you for more government or less government?
I don't know. I'm just kind of fine as how it is.
Okay. So if in the ideal world, would you want more laws or less laws to prosecute people or to not prosecute people?
More laws or less laws?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to answer that question because like I don't know every laws that are out there, and like there's a gajillion. Like, there's a lot of laws, right?
I definitely don't
See,
know.
and that's kind of my point, because there's a gajillion laws out there. We can't keep up with all of them, and if we just add more to them, there's less that we can do, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't mean like it's just because it's hard to do something. Does that mean that like we should just like let people just
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I take this?
be blatantly racist?
Well, people equate hate speech today to physical violence. Like, it is the equivalent of...
Our last interview did.
Oh.
I'm not kidding. He said guns should be banned and speech should be regulated.
People act like if you say something that offends you, it physically hurts you and is limiting somehow your right to exist or to just enjoy your life. And it's like, it's not up to government or regulations to protect you from that. It's not. That's up to you. We can't regulate that, you know?
And my biggest point is who objectively decides what is hate speech and how to regulate it, right? Like, okay, so they want to say race, religion, gender, sexuality, yada, yada, yada. But then that's a very slippery slope. I mean, 70 genders just came out a couple years ago. Yeah. So what if, it's something else is created, like somebody identifies as a tree and they say, well, you can't make fun of trees anymore because I identify as one, and that's a race or a sexuality now. There are people who hump trees. I just want to preface this statement by saying that. There's a YouTube video. I hate Vice. Vice, you are fake news, but they actually did a documentary on it. So what do you think about that? Like, how did we get to a point where people are equating speech to physical violence?
I think, to answer that question, I think a lot of people, our society is just, I don't want to say softer.
Snowflakes.
Yeah.
Just say snowflakes.
Just snowflakes, like people just, everything bothers them. Like, they need to have every aspect of like things that affect their existence under their control. And it's like, that's not what life is about. Life is about like accepting the burden that life is hard, and not everything that you like is gonna, you're not gonna like everything that happens, and you need to accept that. And that's the point of like growing up, getting a job, working hard, doing things. And it's like, when you were so upset by like things not going our way, we try to the government to fix them for us, and that just, it doesn't work. It's unsustainable. The
government, who is trillions of dollars in debt and can't even fix their own economics.
Exactly. Like, and for leftists who talk so much about sustainability, like, what about sustainability of like a system that works? Because this is not going to be a sustainable system if we just keep limiting and limiting and limiting. It's not going to work. The words racist and bigot, they don't mean anything anymore. That's another thing that really bugs me, is they've overused the terms to the point where, the most recent tweets that Donald Trump sent, he sent to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. He didn't even name them. They named themselves. Yeah. But so I want to say, whether you agree with it or not, I personally don't think they're racist, and frankly, I don't care. But the entire point is, even if Donald Trump did something outright racist at this point, nobody would care, because for the last 3 years, it's been Orange Man bad over and over and over again. So now nobody gives a shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one cares anymore.
Are you conservative?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
She was
I
like,
mean,
yup.
I mean, I definitely identify more with like libertarian principles
Sure.
for something that I think is like a system that would work.
Yeah.
But I also know that like we need to be reasonable and rational in like what type of government we're trying to do. And like I love Donald Trump, but to be honest, like probably like a good portion of the reason why I love him so much is how other people is because how much of other people hate him.
I know.
It's
It
like-
makes lefties so butthurt.
Yeah, I'm like I love this guy. Like he's
They
so
actually put up
cool.
posters all over Seattle saying that we were white supremacists and fascists. Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. And a bunch of leftist activists attacked us on Friday and threw eggs at us and milkshakes. The police didn't even bother showing up. And then, here, last week, okay, and I just want to show the hypocritical left.
Yeah.
In front of a sign that says no homophobia, no sexism, no ableism, no yada, 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 a guy comes up to me, calls me a queer, and then hits me. And the management was like, well, it's your fault for being provocative. I had a sign that said free hugs from Trump supporters. It said free hugs. Apparently free hugs is provocative
You know,
now.
they're always telling
Orange
us that
man
we
bad.
need to have more love, and here you are trying to be more loving, and they're just not accepting because of who you
Leftists are incapable of love.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree. I mean, they love government, they love control, they love the state.
Yeah.
They don't appreciate humanity and that all of like the diversity that comes within humanity. They only appreciate the
Exactly.
diversity in skin colors. Like,
So how do we kind of fix this? Because our last interview subject, he said a lot of things about how if you are mean to someone, they may go kill themselves or something like that. And I told him, I was like, look, cyber stalking laws, gang stalking, harassment, you can't do these things. Like if I, like I attacked you over and over again, like racially, for your sex, all that kind of stuff, over and over again online, I would be prosecuted. Like if I came after you, specifically you.
Yeah.
But he was basically saying, well, somebody may have a bad day, and then if you say one thing to them, they may go kill themselves. So you should be held responsible for that. And I was like, how do you even regulate that?
yeah,
Like,
there's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way to regulate
Hold
that.
on your end. You're good. Go ahead.
There's no way to regulate that. Like you can't hold people responsible for it. It's too subjective anyways, so
Yeah.
that's just like again a slippery slope. And like I hate to use the word like, sorry, but when it's just like the burden is on you to accept. Like I said, life is hard. You can't blame other people for your problems. It's personal responsibility, Like if you're having a bad day and someone does something to you, like, and you go and kill yourself, like you're clearly having other mental issues. You're having other problems in your life. If it's just one thing that's upsetting you that much, then you need to do something so drastic.
and so my final question to you is, do you identify as loving Donald Trump publicly? And also, if people know your political beliefs, do they treat you differently because of it?
If people ask me, I say I'm honest, and I love Donald Trump. I'm a conservative. I'm a little nervous that some of my professors might see this. To be completely honest, I'm a poli-sci major, and I'm also an anthropology major.
Do you want us to blur your face? I mean, we are free speech advocates,
No, it's
so
okay.
it's, yeah.
No, it's okay.
Yeah,
Honestly,
and
it's
here's
okay.
here's kind of my final thing is like I want to encourage, like we did this at our speech. We an Antifa member tried to chain us in the room
I saw
at our
that
speech.
video.
Yeah. So it's ridiculous. I'm Muslim. I'm disabled. I'm dark-skinned. I happen to be conservative. Why the fuck do we care about identity politics? My beliefs matter just as much as the next white guy or the next brown woman or anybody else. That's all I care about. And lefties get so butthurt about
They
it.
do. Let me tell you, the other day in my archaeology class, we were talking about privilege and who has the privilege to interpret like archaeological findings and stuff. And this girl in my class, I really like her. She's really sweet, but she's white. And I'm Mexican, I'm a girl, and I'm half deaf.
Yeah.
So that's like the holy trifecta of
Right?
victimhood. But apparently, I mean, I don't think I'm a victim. I mean, I'm at UW.
Yeah.
I live in Washington State. I mean, I'm probably gonna go to grad school, and I'm a pretty smart, capable person, so I feel like I'm gonna be okay. Like,
So you're saying you like yourself are privileged.
yeah.
But you made your bones. I mean, you didn't start off that way.
No.
Like, you made your own way.
Yeah, and this girl's just going on about how privileged she is, and I'm like,
I gotta wonder, why is it always white people?
why do you think? Yeah, I'm like, why do you think you're so privileged? Like, you're majoring in history. I think majoring in history is great. Like,
Yeah.
I'm majoring in archaeology. Like, but I'm like, why do you think that you're gonna be so much better off than me? Because she started mentioning brown people, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I mean, I think you're smart and stuff, but I don't think you're better than me. Like,
exactly.
you know, like.
But I'm so privileged.
Yeah, I'm like, how much more privileged are you? Like, come on, like I work, like I have a job, I can take care of myself. Like it's not my. It's just. I don't know. I'm like, you don't know the half of it. Like, you're just assuming this. And
So I have a couple questions.
yeah.
So you said you're a poli-sci major, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how is your classes like? Because I know poli-sci majors are super leftist, very anti-Trump. It's all about safe species and all this other bullcrap. So how is it in your classes? Like, how do you feel being around these people?
Well, like I said, I care about my grades, so I try not to like be like, oh, I disagree with that, or oh, like.
Oh, wait, seriously?
Well,
so you
depending
fake
on
yourself out in that way?
Not explicitly, but I definitely like play dumb, so to say. I'm like, oh, so you don't think like, you know what I mean? Like trying to be like, oh, what do you mean Donald Trump's racist? Like stuff like that. That's what I mean. I'm like, oh, can you explain that to me? And I'm like, oh, that's not what I heard. You know, just like to students, I'm like pretty open about stuff, but when talking to my professors, a lot of them hint, even if the class is on political theory and we're talking about people from ancient Greece, they cannot help but make analogies to Trump and dictators. And
Of course,
I'm just
literally Hitler guy.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, look, you know, like I said, I care about my grade, but I definitely, when it comes to like talking to professors and stuff, unless it comes up explicitly, I'm not going to advertise the fact because I'm not trying to like.
Wow.
And I think it's unfortunate that there is that feeling on campus. You know, like a lot of my professors have outrightly like said very like anti-Trump things, and that's okay. Like they're entitled to their opinion and stuff. But it just makes me feel like, okay, well, I'm not going to be that open with my own political beliefs because my professors hate him so with such vitriol. I don't want to say anything because what if they're like, oh, well, I'm going to give her like a 2.9 instead of a 3.4.
Well, I mean, if you can prove political bias, you can sue the fuck out of the university.
I know, but I just like keep my head down, play it safe. I'll get them later once I get my degree.
Today's question is, we're trying to figure out the infamous hate speech. I don't know if you've heard the term in the media a lot these days. What exactly is this infamous hate speech?
I don't know if I can give you a definition, but every time somebody tries to hurt somebody through words intentionally, that can be hate speech. But also a lot of people don't realize that they're hurting other people by the way they speak or the terms that they use, and that can also qualify as maybe microaggression or something like that, but also I think it falls into the category of hate speech.
So hate speech is anything that is hurtful?
As long as it's intentional, as long as it's meant to hurt somebody else. But there's also a lot of unconscious things that you can say or you can do based on the culture that you come from or your lack of cultural awareness that can also hurt other people, and in that way they can also become hate speech, I guess.
Sure. So should we have laws against that?
I think so, yeah. I think you also have laws for punching people in the face, for driving people, over, for shooting people. This is a way they can hurt somebody and seriously affect their lives if there are no regulations or anything that you can do about it.
So what happens to people who break hate speech laws? Do they go to jail? Do they get a fine?
Well, I'm obviously not American, so I don't know what's the status quo here. But in my country, I'm from Colombia, there's not a lot of regulation about it. You can maybe claim to have been abused, verbally abused, and that can maybe incur into a fine or something like that, but not jail or anything that's severe.
Well, what happens if you don't pay your fines? You go to jail, right?
I guess so, but also our jail system is pretty complex and overpopulated, so I don't think somebody's going to go to jail just for not paying a fine or anything like that.
Sure, in Colombia, but here, if they made hate speech laws and somebody doesn't pay their fines, they're going to jail.
So, are you asking me what I think should happen, or what actually happens?
That's kind of what I wanted to ask, is what you think should happen.
I don't know. I feel kind of out of place, opinion about a country that is not my country, or how people should regulate their own country. But I think again, hate speech can seriously hurt somebody's life and seriously affect the way they live their lives. So I think the punishment should be maybe not jail, I don't know, but it should be severe enough for people to stop behaving that way and affecting.
But
other
who
people's
objectively
lives.
decides what hate speech is, right? So if you say that, you know, something racial or sexist is offensive, yeah? But is making, so for instance, I make a joke about women, kitchens, and sandwiches, but a woman I'm a comedian, and the woman in my audience gets offended, and she reports me to the Hate Speech Regulation Council, or whatever they're going to call it, and she says I should go to jail. Is that fair?
I guess there's stuff that's based on stereotypes, like if you're being sexist to a woman, that falls into a stereotype, and maybe it's not necessarily hate speech in my opinion, that just make you look like a jerk. But when it comes to your racial profile, your upbringing, your sexual orientation, there are things that are essential to your personality. It's not like cooking or, you know, behaving ladylike in a way. Those are things that are more profound in
But
my
you don't
opinion.
think limiting freedom of speech could be a serious slippery slope? I mean, like I said, who objectively decides? Because this has to be regulated, right? If it's actually going to be regulated and becomes law, it has to be regulated. There has to be objective standards for deciding what hate speech actually is. So if we, for instance, say someone supports Donald Trump, and somebody says Donald Trump is an orange toadstool or something random like that, should they go to jail? I mean, it offended me.
It didn't offend you. It may have offended Donald Trump, but he's not talking about his race, his upbringing, his beliefs.
But
He's
one
just-
could term that as it affects my political beliefs because he happens to be the president of the United States.
but-
So what I'm saying is this is a very slippery slope. So when you say, okay, well, there has to be laws against being mean to women, for instance, or making
didn't say
jokes
that.
and stuff, well, what do you, like, where does it stop? Where is the slope? Where is the line drawn on what terms as hate speech and what, like, how the laws should be drawn?
I think that's the responsibility for lawmakers and the people that make the laws.
Do we really want to give the lawmakers the responsibility
that's why
to do
we
that?
vote for them. My personal opinion is, like, if I were to make a law, I think as long as you're discussing politics, most things should be, you know, fair enough to express, as long as they don't intentionally affect somebody else's, like, they're not directed, like they're not ad hominem, they're not direct to the other person's being, I guess. But when it comes to political beliefs, everything should be discussed, I guess. But when it comes to race, when it comes to sexual orientation, when it comes to your upbringing, there are things that are definitely out of line. So again, I don't think it's my job to decide what's acceptable and what is not. But I think that there's the possibility, and there should be a possibility of making, like, drawing a straight line that separates both things. But that comes again to where's making the laws and where's enforcing the laws. But I think there are certain things that are definitely out of line, that you can definitely say this is, like, you can draw a line in the sand and say these things are not acceptable.
What about comedy? Is comedy immune? Like, for instance, if somebody wants to make a joke about black people, my co-host is black. I make fun of him sometimes. Should I go to jail for that?
Do you make fun of him for being black?
I mean, I talk about Kool-Aid a lot.
I don't know. Not.
I'm Muslim. He talks about blowing shit up a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Colombia and my dad is mulatto, and even though I'm white, I don't know. It's a complicated thing, I guess. But when it comes to comedy, comedy is tougher because comedy kind of reflects on how we feel. Also, comedy can be ironic. You can be expressing things that you don't necessarily believe in. I think sarcasm is a national treasure and it should be preserved.
Sure.
But again, if your main intention, if your main point is to belittle somebody, to make somebody feel bad, I don't think there's any point to that. Like, I don't think there's anything inherently funny about doing that. I was watching a movie the other day with Rebel Wilson. I was in a plane and I had to watch it. It's called.
I know. There's only like 3 movies.
It's called, isn't it? No, the person in front of me was watching.
Oh,
it was very
okay.
distracting.
That's even worse.
It was very distracting. It's called, isn't it romantic? So it's supposed to enforce the position of women, and especially women that are overweight and body acceptance and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's an hour and a half of fat jokes. So in that case, I think that's kind of offensive. Like, instead of helping or instead of uplifting the people that you're directing your comedy to, you're actually just insulting them.
So my final question to you is, you may think those things are offensive, but many other people may find them absolutely hilarious. I, for instance, would find that movie hilarious.
Yeah.
Likely. I mean, some of the jokes may be in bad taste, but for the most part, I find fat jokes, you know, pretty funny. I mean, I grew up making them. I'm kind of chubby myself, as you can see, so can't call anyone fat.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. And the point I really want to leave you with.
Last thing that you said is also kind of, in my opinion, it's also kind of, it's a slippery slope. Like, I'm Colombian,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't feel comfortable making jokes about like cocaine and Pablo Escobar and stuff like that. Precisely because I'm Colombian, I know the reality of those kind of things.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes to me and starts making those kind of jokes,
Yeah.
I guess I don't get as easily offended as many other people, but I still think that those are in poor taste. And I
So
definitely
definitely, cocaine has gotten many, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people killed over the last few decades.
Yeah,
I know.
especially in my country.
I know. And that's why making those kind of jokes would be in horrifically bad taste. But I just want to say it's a very slippery slope if we start regulating someone's speech because someone's offended, because many people may not be offended. And I think that's why we have the First Amendment in this country. But there is a large subsection of the country, I think the progressive left is 8%, that would like to overturn that amendment.
There are extremes, I guess. But again, I think there are definitely things that are fair game. You want to talk about what you believe, talk about what you believe. You want to talk about, what you think is funny about other people. You may be able to do that to a certain extent, but when you start talking about, you're inferior to me because of the race you are, you're inferior to me because of your sexual orientation, you're inferior to me because of the country you come from. I think those things are out of line and should be regulated in a way.